The space around Earth's sun looked empty and peaceful, just like it had for millions of years. Stars shone quietly in the dark void, and planets moved slowly in their paths around the bright yellow star. But on this day, something terrible was about to happen. Captain Jinwoo Park sat at his control desk on Luna Station, watching the screens that showed him what was happening far out in space. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. The numbers on his screen made his stomach feel sick. Something big was coming toward Earth, and it wasn't friendly. "Captain," said Minji Kim, the young woman who worked the communication systems. Her voice shook a little. "I'm getting readings from the edge of our solar system. It's huge." Jinwoo looked at the data flowing across his screens. 300 alien ships were heading straight for Earth. Each ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The largest ones were the size of small cities covered in weapons that could destroy whole planets. "Send the message again," Jinwoo told Minji. "All languages. Maybe they'll listen this time." Minji pressed the buttons on her control panel. A recording of Earth's final warning played across space radio waves. The message was simple but clear. "This is Earth speaking to the approaching fleet. You are entering human space. Turn back now or you will face the results of your choice. We do not want to fight, but we will defend ourselves." The message traveled through space at the speed of light, reaching the alien ships in less than an hour. The answer that came back made everyone on Luna Station go quiet. "Your weak species will make good slaves," the alien voice said through the speakers. The words were cold and full of hate. "Fighting us is useless. Give up now, and some of you might live." Dr. Hyunwoo Choi was working late in his lab in New Geneva when the alien message reached Earth. As the planet's top expert on alien life, he had been studying everything they could learn about these invaders. The aliens called themselves the Valith Dominion, and they had been taking over planets for 1,000 years. Hyunwoo looked at the pictures his satellites had taken of the alien fleet. The ships were dark red like dried blood, with sharp edges and weapon ports covering every surface. The aliens inside were tall and thin, with gray skin and cold eyes. They had destroyed 43 different worlds, turning billions of living beings into slaves. But there was something the aliens didn't know about humans. Something they had missed in all their scans and studies of Earth. On the orbital defense platform called Prometheus, a young engineer named Sora Lee was making final checks on systems the aliens had never seen before. Her fingers moved quickly over the control screens, turning on machines that had been built in secret over many years. "All systems ready," she told her team. "When they get close enough, we'll show them what humans can really do." The alien fleet moved past the planet Neptune, getting closer to Earth every hour. On each ship, Valith soldiers prepared their weapons and planned how they would take over the small blue world. They had done this so many times before. First, they would destroy Earth's space defenses. Then they would attack the major cities from orbit until the humans gave up. Finally, they would land and put the survivors to work in their mines and factories. Admiral Keith Vore stood on the command deck of his flagship, looking at the tactical displays that showed Earth getting bigger on his screens. The human planet looked so small and helpless. Their technology was hundreds of years behind Valith science. Their weapons were weak and their ships were tiny. "How many human vessels are defending their homeworld?" he asked his tactical officer. 800 ships, Admiral," came the reply. "Our fleet analysis shows they cannot hurt our shields or armor." "This will be over quickly." Keith Vore smiled, showing his sharp teeth. 43 worlds had fallen to his fleets. This would be the easiest conquest yet. But down on Earth, in the deep command bunkers built under mountains, human leaders were making their final preparations. General Tae-hoon Kim looked at the reports coming in from all over the solar system. Every human colony, every space station, every mining platform was ready. "They think they know what we are," Tae-hoon said to his staff. "They scanned our cities, counted our ships, measured our weapons. But they never looked at our hearts." The alien ships crossed into the inner solar system, passing Mars and heading for Earth. On each human world and station, people watched the dark red ships approach. Children held their parents' hands. Soldiers checked their weapons one last time. Engineers like Sora made sure every system was working perfectly. Captain Yuna Oh stood on the bridge of her destroyer, the Inchin's Pride. Around her, 43 crew members prepared for battle. They all knew they probably wouldn't survive the fight, but none of them thought about running away. "This is Captain Oh to all ships," she said into her radio. "Remember why we're here. We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every human child who deserves to grow up free. We're fighting for every family that should never have to bow to alien masters. Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of. Across the fleet, 800 human captains gave similar speeches to their crews. They talked about home, about family, about freedom. The aliens had superior numbers and better weapons, but they had never faced an enemy like this. As the red ships got closer, the trap was almost ready. Mining platforms throughout the solar system powered up their hidden weapons. Defense stations activated systems the aliens couldn't detect. And on Luna Station, Captain Jinwoo Park sent one final message to the approaching fleet. "This is your last warning," his voice carried across space. "Leave now, or learn why no one else ever came this deep into human territory." The alien admiral laughed when he heard the message. Humans were even more foolish than he had thought. Soon they would understand the true power of the Valeth Dominion. But Admiral Kyath Vor had made his first terrible mistake. He thought he was fighting against Earth's military. He didn't realize he was about to face something much more dangerous, an entire species that would never stop protecting their families. Admiral Keith Vor expected the humans to surrender as soon as they saw his massive fleet. Every other species had done the same thing when faced with Valeth power. They would send desperate messages begging for mercy, offering to give up without a fight if their lives were spared. Instead, something happened that had never occurred in 1,000 years of Dominion conquests. The humans came out to fight. From his command center deep under the Himalayan mountains, General Taehoon Kim watched 800 human ships leave their hiding places behind moons and asteroids. Each ship was tiny compared to the alien vessels, like insects flying toward giant birds of prey. But they moved with purpose and determination that made the general proud. "All ships report ready for battle," his communications officer announced. "Captain O is leading the first attack wave." Taehoon nodded grimly. He had known Yuna O since she was a young cadet. She had 2 children back on Earth and a husband who worked as a teacher. Like so many others, she was fighting for more than just her planet. She was fighting for the right of her family to exist. Captain Yuna O sat in her command chair aboard the Incheon's Pride, watching the alien dreadnoughts grow larger on her screen. Her ship shook as the engines pushed it to maximum speed. Around her, 43 crew members worked at their stations with calm focus. They all knew this would probably be their last battle. "Target the lead ship's weapon systems," Yuna ordered. "If we're going to die today, let's make it count." Her tactical officer, a young man named Jahoon, worked quickly to lock onto the massive alien vessel. "Missiles ready, Captain. All tubes loaded?" "Fire everything we have," Yuna said quietly. "For Earth, for our families, for everyone who comes after us." The human fleet struck the alien vanguard like a wave of fury. Missiles and energy beams lit up the space between the fleets as 800 small ships attacked 300 massive ones. The aliens returned fire with weapons that could crack moons, turning human vessels into clouds of burning metal. The first battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When the weapons stopped firing, debris from 200 human ships floated in the darkness like a field of stars. The Valeth had lost only 6 vessels, and those were damaged, not destroyed. Admiral Kyath Vor felt satisfaction wash over him. The humans had fought bravely, he would give them that. But bravery meant nothing against superior firepower. Now they would understand their place in the universe. He opened a communication channel to Earth, ready to accept their surrender. "People of Earth," his voice boomed across all radio frequencies, "your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are broken. Surrender now, and we will allow some of your population to live as our servants. Continue to resist and we will turn your world into ash." The response came not from Earth's government or military commanders, but from an unexpected source. A maintenance worker on mining platform Delta 7 had somehow accessed the communication system. His name was Dongyun Park, and he cleaned air filters and repaired machinery for a living. "This is Earth speaking." Dongyun's calm voice traveled across space to the alien fleet. "You were warned to stay away. You chose not to listen. Now you'll understand why nobody else came this far into human space." Admiral Keith Vor stared at his communication officer in confusion. A janitor is threatening the might of the Dominion? But even as he spoke, something was happening throughout the solar system. Jiwan Nam, an engineer on asteroid mining platform Series 12, entered a final command into her control system. Similar commands were being entered on dozens of other platforms by people whose names would never be remembered by history. The mining platforms had been built over 50 years of human expansion into space. They dug metals and rare elements from asteroids, sending the materials back to Earth to build ships and cities. But over the decades, human engineers had slowly modified them for another purpose. Each platform had been hollowed out and filled with antimatter, the most powerful explosive force humans had ever learned to create. The platforms were connected by a network of quantum communicators that would let them all explode at exactly the same moment. Donghyun Park, the maintenance worker who had spoken to the aliens, pressed a single button on his control panel. "For everyone who warned you to stay away," he said softly. The mining platforms detonated simultaneously across the solar system. 27 artificial suns bloomed in the darkness as antimatter met matter and released energy equivalent to stellar cores. The explosions created a chain reaction that tore through space itself, generating gravitational waves that could be felt on distant planets. The Valeth fleet found itself caught in the middle of this cosmic firestorm. Their shields, designed to withstand conventional weapons, failed against forces that rivaled the birth of stars. Ship after ship vanished in blasts of pure energy as the space around them became uninhabitable. Admiral Keith Vor watched in horror as half his fleet simply ceased to exist. Dreadnoughts that had conquered dozens of worlds were torn apart by energies his science barely understood. In less than 10 minutes, the most powerful invasion force in Dominion history had been cut in half by a species they considered primitive. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his science officers. "Their technology is centuries behind ours." But Dr. Minho Song, monitoring the battle from his research station on Europa, could have answered that question. The aliens had made a critical error in understanding human nature. They had scanned Earth's weapons and ships and cities, measuring everything they could see. But they had never looked at human creativity, human determination, or human willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. The mining platform explosions had cost humanity 50 years of space infrastructure and the lives of thousands of workers. But they had also shown the aliens something they had never encountered before, a species that would rather destroy everything they had built than let it be taken by invaders. As the energy storms from the explosions began to fade, Admiral Keith Vor took stock of his remaining forces. He still had over 100 ships, more than enough to destroy Earth's remaining defenses. But for the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. The humans had just demonstrated that they didn't fight like other species. They didn't try to preserve their infrastructure or minimize their losses. They fought like cornered animals protecting their young, willing to sacrifice anything and everything if it meant hurting their enemies. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the remaining human settlements." "Put them on the main screen," Keith Vor ordered. One by one, voices from across human space began to speak. A doctor from Mars colony said simply, "We're still here." A teacher from the lunar settlements added, "And we're still fighting." A farmer from the asteroid belt finished, "Come and take what's left, if you can." Admiral Keith Vor realized that destroying half his fleet had not broken human resistance. If anything, it seemed to have made them more determined. These strange beings actually appeared to be encouraged by their own losses, as if every sacrifice made the survivors stronger. For the first time in 1,000 years of conquest, the Valeth Dominion faced an enemy that became more dangerous as the battle continued, and Admiral Keith Vor began to understand that he might have made a terrible mistake by coming to this small blue world at the edge of the galaxy. Admiral Keith Vor had conquered 43 worlds in his long career. He knew exactly how to break a species' will to fight. First, you destroyed their military. Then you targeted their civilians until their leaders begged for mercy. It had worked every single time, but the humans were different. Losing half his fleet to their mining platform trap had only made them fight harder. Dr. Minho Song watched the alien fleet advance from his research station on Europa. As an expert in alien psychology, he had studied the Valeth conquest records. The Admiral followed the same pattern on every world: show overwhelming force, target civilian populations, and wait for surrender. What the alien didn't understand was that humans had no breaking point. The terror campaign began 3 hours after the mining platform explosions. Valeth warships targeted New Shanghai orbital habitat, home to 50,000 civilian families. The attack came without warning. Plasma beams that could melt mountains struck the spinning station and turned it into a cloud of burning metal and atmosphere. Admiral Keith Vore broadcast his message to Earth immediately after. This is what happens to those who resist the Dominion. Surrender now or watch more of your people die. The response came from an unexpected source. Seungmin Lee was just a cargo pilot, flying supplies between Mars and the asteroid mining stations. His ship was old and slow, carrying nothing but food and spare parts. When he saw the new Shanghai massacre on his radio, something inside him broke and reformed into something harder. This is cargo vessel Happy Crane to all human ships. Seungmin's voice was steady and calm. New Shanghai was my home station. My sister worked there. My nephew went to school there. He paused for a moment. I'm going to make them pay for it. Seungmin turned his slow cargo ship toward the nearest Valith cruiser. His vessel had no weapons, no shields. Nothing but a hold full of metal containers and a fusion reactor that powered his engines. But he had something the aliens didn't understand. The absolute certainty that some things were worth dying for. The collision happened at nearly the speed of light. Seungmin's cargo ship struck the alien cruiser just as he overloaded his reactor, creating a fusion explosion that tore through both vessels. The cruiser's entire fighter wing was destroyed, along with 300 Valith soldiers. Seungmin's final transmission echoed across human space. For New Shanghai. For my sister. For everyone who should have grown up free. Similar acts of defiance erupted throughout the solar system. On Mars Colony, Dr. Gayung Shin was working her shift at the medical center when Valith drop pods began falling from the sky like deadly rain. She was a doctor, trained to save lives, not take them. But when alien soldiers started hunting her patients, she discovered she could learn new skills quickly. Gayung turned the hospital into a fortress. She armed the nurses with surgical tools and taught the orderlies how to make bombs from medical supplies. When the Valith shock troops reached the medical center, they expected to find frightened civilians hiding in the basement. Instead, they found 63 humans who had decided that some places were sacred. The aliens had better weapons and armor, but they had never fought an enemy that knew every hallway and ventilation shaft of the building they were defending. The battle for Mars Medical Center lasted 6 days. Gayung treated wounded defenders in operating rooms while calling down artillery strikes on her own building when the aliens got too close. She performed surgery during bombardments and taught children how to reload weapons between patient visits. When the aliens finally broke through to the main ward, they found Gayung still at work. She was operating on a wounded soldier with one hand, while firing a pistol at the doorway with the other. The alien who killed her found a note she had pinned to her medical coat. A doctor's job is to preserve life. Today I preserved the lives of everyone who came after us. Reports like this flooded back to Admiral Keith Vore from all across human space. His psychological warfare experts couldn't explain what they were seeing. Humans didn't behave like other conquered species. They didn't break under pressure. They didn't surrender when their situation became hopeless. Instead, they seemed to get stronger and more determined with every loss. The Admiral called up the files on every species the Dominion had ever conquered. Tall warrior races that had fought bravely, but accepted defeat when the odds became impossible. Ancient civilizations with powerful technology that had negotiated surrender when their cities started burning. Even hive mind species that had simply shut down when their central nodes were destroyed. But humans were different. They had no central authority that could surrender for everyone. Every individual seemed to make their own choice to fight or die, and almost all of them chose to fight. When their leaders were killed, new leaders stepped forward. When their weapons were destroyed, they made new ones from whatever they could find. Jemin Ko, Earth's Minister of Colonial Defense, tried to explain it in a broadcast to the remaining human settlements. He stood in the ruins of Geneva, surrounded by burning buildings and the sound of distant explosions. The aliens think they're fighting soldiers, Jemin said to the camera. They don't understand what they've really encountered. They're fighting teachers who took up guns to protect their students. They're fighting doctors who turned hospitals into bunkers to save their patients. They're fighting farmers who rigged their tractors with explosives to stop enemy tanks. He paused to duck as another alien fighter flew overhead, then continued. They're fighting parents who will never let anyone hurt their children. And that's not something you can defeat with bigger guns or more ships. As the third day of invasion dawned, Admiral Keith Vore studied the casualty reports. His forces had taken every major human military base and destroyed most of their defensive installations. By every logical measure, the humans should have surrendered hours ago. Instead, resistance was actually increasing. Children who had lost their parents were learning to build bombs. Elderly people who could barely walk were volunteering for suicide missions. Even the wounded were fighting from their hospital beds, teaching others how to make weapons from medical equipment. The Admiral's science officers had run psychological profiles on dozens of captured humans. The results made no sense. These beings showed no signs of a hive mind or central control system. They weren't following orders from some hidden command structure. Each individual human was making their own personal decision to fight to the death, and somehow they all reached the same conclusion. It's impossible, his chief psychologist reported. Individual creatures cannot coordinate this level of resistance without some form of higher control. There must be something we're missing. But Admiral Kithvor was beginning to understand the truth. He had spent 1,000 years conquering species that fought to preserve their civilizations, their governments, or their way of life. All of those things could be destroyed or negotiated away. The humans weren't fighting for their civilization or their government. They were fighting for each other. Every single one of them was willing to die before they would let the aliens hurt their families, their friends, their neighbors, or even strangers they had never met. And that, the Admiral realized with growing dread, was something that could never be conquered. Admiral Kithvor's remaining forces pushed toward Earth itself, leaving a trail of burning human colonies behind them. Each victory cost more ships than it should have. The humans refused to accept that they were beaten, fighting with a fury that made no tactical sense. But the Admiral had one final strategy that had never failed him. For 1,000 years, the Valeth had used the same technique to break even the most stubborn species, demonstrate overwhelming power against their homeworld, and watch their will to fight collapse. Hanel Park commanded Earth's last orbital defense grid from a station hidden on the dark side of the moon. Around her, dozens of technicians worked frantically to coordinate the planet's remaining weapons. She knew they could slow the alien advance for maybe an hour before their position was discovered and destroyed. Next to her, Wu Jinjiang calculated firing solutions that would give them the best chance of damaging the alien dreadnoughts before they died. His numbers weren't encouraging. Earth's weapons had been designed to fight other human ships, not alien vessels with technology centuries ahead of their own. "How many shots do we get?" Hanel asked quietly. Wu Jin checked his calculations one more time. "Maybe 20 volleys before they locate us and return fire. After that," he shrugged. They both knew what came after that. The Valeth bombardment began at dawn, Earth time. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroid belts focused their fire on the planet's surface. Mountains turned to glass under the assault. Oceans boiled and turned to steam. Major cities vanished in seconds as energy beams hotter than the core of stars struck them from orbit. Admiral Kithvor watched the destruction from his flagship's command deck. This was the moment that always broke enemy resistance when they saw their homeworld burning and realized that continued fighting would only mean more death. He opened a communication channel to broadcast his final ultimatum to Earth survivors. "People of Earth, your world is dying. Your cities are ash. Your defenses are gone. Surrender now, and those of you still alive may live to serve the Dominion. Continue this hopeless resistance and we will turn your entire planet into a ball of molten rock." The Admiral expected to receive desperate pleas for mercy from Earth's government. Instead, the response came from a source that shocked his entire crew. A small voice spoke across the communication channel. The voice of a child. 8-year-old Kyung Min Yoon had somehow accessed the planetary communication grid from a shelter deep beneath the ruins of Seoul. Her words carried across space to every ship in the alien fleet. "My daddy died, fighting you bad guys," the little girl said, with the simple clarity that only children possess. "My mommy died fighting you too. But I'm still here and I'm still fighting you. All of us kids are still fighting you because that's what our mommies and daddies taught us to do." Admiral Kithvor stared at his communication officer. "A child? A human child is defying the might of the Dominion." But even as he spoke, more voices began to join the transmission. Children from shelters all across the burning planet started talking to the alien fleet. They told stories about their parents who had died protecting them. They sang songs their teachers had taught them. They asked when the bad aliens were going to go away so they could rebuild their homes. None of them begged for mercy. None of them asked the aliens to stop hurting them. They just talked about their families and promised to keep fighting no matter what happened. The effect on the Valeth crew was immediate and disturbing. These hardened soldiers had spent centuries conquering worlds, but they had never heard children speak so calmly about death and destruction. The human young didn't sound terrified or broken. They sounded determined. In that moment, Admiral HFY understood his final and most terrible miscalculation. He had assumed the humans were fighting for their territory, their resources, their government, or their technology. All of those things could be destroyed or taken away, but the humans weren't fighting for things that could be conquered. They were fighting for each other. Every parent who died passed their determination to their children. Every teacher who fell made sure their students knew why the fight mattered. Every soldier who sacrificed themselves did it to protect people they had never met, but cared about anyway. As Earth burned around them, the planet's survivors activated their final defense. But it wasn't a weapon, it was a message. Sun Ho Kim, broadcasting from a hidden transmitter in the Antarctic, sent the same signal to every corner of the galaxy. "This is Earth calling all free peoples of the galaxy." Sun Ho's voice carried across light years of space. "We are under attack by the Valeth Dominion. We have fought them with everything we have. Most of us are gone now, but we want you to know what we learned about these aliens." The message continued as Earth's cities burned. "The Valeth are not as strong as they want you to believe. They needed their entire fleet to attack one small human world. They lost half their ships to people they thought were primitive and weak. If we can hurt them this badly, imagine what you could do." But the most powerful part of the message came from the children. Kyungmin and dozens of other young voices from across the planet added their own words to the broadcast. "We're just kids, but we're not scared of the big bad aliens. Our families taught us that some things are worth fighting for. Freedom is worth fighting for. Each other is worth fighting for. Don't let them make you slaves. Fight back like our mommies and daddies did." The transmission reached alien civilizations across the galaxy, species that had been conquered by the Valeth centuries ago and forced to serve the Dominion. For the first time, they heard a species that had made the mighty Valeth pay a terrible price for victory. Within hours, reports began reaching the Dominion High Command. The Krathan Rebellion had flared up again on the Outer Rim worlds. The Zilani had destroyed 3 Valeth garrison fleets. Even the peaceful Morvani had begun sabotaging the mining operations on their homeworld. Admiral HFY received these reports as his forces finally broke through Earth's atmosphere. He had won his victory, but it felt hollow. The human homeworld was conquered, its population mostly dead, its military destroyed. Yet somehow, impossibly, he felt like he had lost something much more important than he had gained. The truth was spreading across the galaxy. The Valeth Empire had needed 90% of their military strength to defeat one small human world. If these primitive humans could make the Dominion bleed so badly, what could other species accomplish if they stopped being afraid? As his troops prepared to land on the burning remains of Earth, Admiral HFY wondered if winning this battle might have cost him the war. The humans had shown every enslaved species in the galaxy that even gods could bleed, and gods who could bleed could also die. The siege of Earth lasted exactly 72 hours. When Admiral HFY's dreadnought finally broke through the planet's burning atmosphere, he expected to find a broken civilization begging for mercy. Instead, he discovered something that would haunt the Valeth Dominion for generations to come. Dongwook Min had been a university professor before the invasion began. He taught history to young students who dreamed of exploring the stars and meeting alien civilizations in peace. When the aliens arrived with weapons instead of friendship, he put away his books and picked up a rifle. The professor met the alien ground forces in the ruins of Seoul with nothing but civilian volunteers armed with whatever they could find. Shop owners fought beside students. Elderly grandparents stood next to teenagers who should have been in school. None of them were soldiers, but all of them knew why they were there. "Remember," Dongwook told his ragged group of defenders as the alien dropships landed around them, "we're not fighting to win. We're fighting so the galaxy remembers what humans stood for." The battle for Seoul's city center lasted 18 hours. Valeth shock troops with advanced armor and energy weapons faced humans armed with hunting rifles and homemade bombs. The aliens had orbital bombardment support and air superiority. The humans had narrow streets they knew by heart, and the absolute certainty that this was where they would make their final stand. Professor Dongwook fought from building to building. leading as volunteers in a defense that made no military sense but perfect human sense. They weren't trying to hold strategic positions or protect valuable resources. They were fighting for the memory of everyone who had come before them. When alien plasma cannons finally breached their last stronghold, the professor was found clutching a photograph of his students, the young people he had taught about the wonders of the universe before that same universe had shown them its cruelty. But the aliens discovered something else that shook them to their core. Carved into the walls around the professor's body were thousands of names. Every human who had died in the invasion was listed there, preserved in stone by people who refused to let them be forgotten. Names of starship captains who had rammed their vessels into alien dreadnoughts. Names of doctors who had turned hospitals into fortresses. Names of children who had sent defiant messages across space even as their world burned around them. Names of ordinary people who had chosen to do extraordinary things when everything they loved was threatened. Admiral HFY stood in the ruins, trying to understand what he was seeing. The Valith had won their invasion. Earth was conquered, its military destroyed, its population reduced to scattered survivors hiding in bunkers. Yet somehow the victory felt like defeat. The answer came when his communication officer brought him the final transmission from Earth's defenders. HFY had been one of the last human commanders, fighting a hopeless battle from a hidden base in the Arctic. Before her position was overrun, she had managed to upload something that would change the course of galactic history. Complete battle records of the invasion had been transmitted to every corner of known space. The message included tactical data, casualty reports, and detailed analysis of Valith weaknesses. But most importantly, it included something that no amount of military technology could overcome: proof that the mighty Dominion could be hurt. This is Commander HFY of the Earth Defense Force. Her final transmission began. To anyone who receives this message, know that the Valith Empire required 90% of their total military strength to defeat one small human world. They lost over half their invasion fleet to a species they considered primitive and weak. The message continued as explosions echoed in the background. We could not save our world, but we have shown you something important. These aliens are not unstoppable. They can be hurt. They can be defeated. The only question is whether you have the courage to try. Within days of the transmission's spread, the unthinkable began happening across Valith space. The Krathen, enslaved for 300 years, declared independence and destroyed every Dominion outpost in their system. The Zalani uprising spread to 17 worlds. Even species that had been model subjects for centuries began sabotaging mining operations and attacking garrison forces. The psychological impact was devastating. If weak, primitive humans could make the Valith pay such a terrible price for victory, what could advanced civilizations accomplish? What could warrior races do? What about species that had been quietly developing new technologies while pretending to serve their masters? Miscalculation was commanding humanity's last colony ship, the New Dawn, when Earth finally fell. The vessel contained 50,000 human civilians who had escaped the solar system before the invasion began. They were the only free humans left in the galaxy, carrying the dreams and memories of their entire species. From his command chair, Miscalculation sent the final human message across the stars. It was simple, but it carried the weight of everything his people had sacrificed. This is the New Dawn calling all civilizations of the galaxy. Earth has fallen, but humanity's message lives on. We were not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced. But we were the species that never stopped fighting for each other, and that made all the difference. The message reached worlds across the galaxy, where enslaved populations had spent centuries living in fear of their Valith masters. But now they had seen something that changed everything. Proof that the Dominion could bleed. Admiral HFY filed his victory report with growing unease. Yes, Earth was conquered. Yes, the human military was destroyed. But the cost had been enormous and the consequences were spreading like wildfire across Dominion space. 17 client species had declared independence. Garrison forces on dozens of worlds were under attack. The Dominion's carefully maintained image of invincibility was shattered, replaced by the knowledge that even their mightiest fleets could be hurt by species they had dismissed as inferior. The humans had done something no one else had ever managed. They had made resistance look possible instead of hopeless. In the end, the Valith won their war against humanity. But in winning, they had lost something much more valuable: the fear that kept their empire together. The galaxy had learned that gods could bleed, and bleeding gods could die. Years later, as the Dominion crumbled under rebellions it could no longer contain, historians would mark the invasion of Earth as the beginning of the end. Not because the humans had won their fight, but because they had shown everyone else how to lose so magnificently that defeat became victory. The Kir warning humanity had broadcast to the approaching Velith fleet echoed across the galaxy in ways the aliens never expected. They had ignored the warning about entering human territory, and they had learned why no one else had ever gone so far into human space. It wasn't because humans were the strongest or the most advanced. It was because humans were the species that would rather die fighting than live kneeling. And that lesson, carved in the ruins of Earth and written in the stars with the blood of heroes, would inspire the galaxy long after the last human voice had fallen silent. The Velith had won their war, but they had lost the peace, the fear, and ultimately the empire that victory was supposed to secure. Sometimes the most important battles are won by the losing side.